The emergency meeting at Morgan Industries was supposed to be routine final preparations for their global product launch. Instead, chaos erupted when the central generator died, plunging everything into darkness. Senior engineers panicked as the clock ticked toward disaster. No one dared promise a fix in time for the demonstration that would make or break the company's future. Alex Reeves, a maintenance worker, stood quietly in the corner, observing the panic with the steady gaze of a man who had faced far worse than a broken generator. Morgan Sterling, 34, beautiful, powerful, and notoriously demanding, commanded the room with an icy precision that had earned her the media nickname, the Ice Queen of Renewable Energy. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her designer suit impeccable, her expression unreadable as she assessed the situation. She had graduated from Harvard Business School at 25, taken over 3 failing energy startups by 30, and transformed her father's company into a renewable powerhouse worth $12 billion. But beneath the polished exterior lay wounds that had never healed. Her mother had taken her own life when Morgan was 16, unable to bear Charles Sterling's endless affairs and cold indifference. Morgan had found her mother's body in the bathtub of their Manhattan penthouse, pills scattered across Italian marble, a note that simply read, "Love is weakness." From that day forward, Morgan had built her life around a simple principle: never let anyone close enough to hurt you. Romance was a distraction, marriage was a business merger, and people like maintenance workers existed in a different universe, one that barely registered in her consciousness. Alex Reeves's universe revolved around a 7-year-old girl named Emma. At 36, he possessed the kind of rugged handsomeness that came from actual work rather than gym memberships. Broad shoulders from lifting, calloused hands from fixing, crow's feet from squinting at circuit boards under harsh fluorescent lights. He'd once been Lieutenant Colonel Alex Reeves, head of engineering for the Army Corps, designing power grids for forward operating bases in Afghanistan. He'd had a promising career, a beautiful wife named Sarah, and plans for a big family. Then Sarah had left him a note shorter than Morgan's mother's. "I can't do this." She'd walked out when Emma was 6 months old, leaving Alex with a baby, a broken heart, and a choice. He'd chosen Emma. The military career ended. The 6-figure salary disappeared. He took contract maintenance jobs that let him pick up Emma from school, help with homework, tuck her in every night. His world had shrunk from international deployments to a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, from commanding hundreds to answering to supervisors half his age who couldn't tell a capacitor from a resistor. But when Emma looked at him with those green eyes, Sarah's eyes, and called him the best daddy in the world, he knew he'd made the right choice. Every sacrifice was worth her smile, every missed opportunity justified by her laughter. She was brilliant, his Emma, obsessed with robots and circuits, always asking how broken things could be fixed. "Just like people," she'd once said with startling wisdom. "Sometimes people break too, but that doesn't mean they can't work again." Alex had hugged her tight that day, wondering how a 7-year-old understood what adults often forgot. Their first encounter had happened 3 weeks before the generator crisis, though neither would have called it memorable. Alex had been called to the executive floor to fix an electrical short that had knocked out half the overhead lighting. The in-house electrical team had spent 2 hours examining blueprints, arguing about building codes, calling manufacturers. Alex had arrived with a toolbox and 20 years of experience. He'd found the problem in 10 minutes, a corroded ground wire hidden behind a marble panel. While the senior engineers debated solutions, Alex had quietly fixed it. The lights had come back on just as Morgan Sterling had stepped out of the elevator, her heels clicking against marble floors like a countdown to execution. She'd been on her phone negotiating a merger worth hundreds of millions when she'd noticed mud on the marble, tracked in from the parking lot where Alex had walked through a puddle to reach the service entrance. Her voice had cut through his concentration like a blade. "You maintenance? My Tesla has mud splashed on the driver's side. Take care of it." She hadn't looked at his face, hadn't seen the way his jaw tightened at being addressed like furniture. Alex had set down his tools slowly, deliberately. He'd turned to face her, and for just a moment, their eyes had met. She'd expected defiance, maybe anger. Instead, she'd found something else, a quiet dignity that made her uncomfortable. "I'll clean it with the cleanest hands available," he'd said, his voice carrying an odd emphasis on the word cleanest. She'd already dismissed him from her mind, returning to her call as she walked away. Later, reviewing security footage while investigating a separate issue, she'd seen him in the parking garage. He'd spent 15 minutes meticulously cleaning her car, not with the quick spray and wipe job she'd expected, but with the careful attention of someone who understood that how you do small things reflects how you do everything. She'd also seen him afterward, sharing his lunch with a homeless veteran who lived near the garage entrance, sitting with the man for 20 minutes, listening to stories about Vietnam. She told herself it didn't matter. People were either useful or they weren't. Alex Reeves was maintenance, useful for fixing things, nothing more. Yet something about his deliberate care, his quiet kindness when he thought no one was watching, had lodged in her mind like a splinter she couldn't quite remove. The morning of the product launch had started like a military operation. 200 journalists from 30 countries were gathered in the main auditorium. The demonstration required perfect timing, a synchronized display of Morgan Industries' new solar panel grid that could power an entire city block from a surface area the size of a basketball court. The investors alone represented $60 billion in potential contracts. The Department of Energy had sent a delegation. 3 senators were in attendance. Everything depended on the massive generator that powered not just the building's regular operations, but the entire demonstration grid. At 11:30, in the middle of the final technical review, that generator had died. The failure was catastrophic and inexplicable. The generator was only 2 years old, Swedish engineered with triple redundancy systems. The senior engineering team, 15 men and women with advanced degrees from MIT, Stanford, and Caltech, huddled around diagnostic tablets, their voices growing increasingly panicked. "Minimum 6 hours to diagnose," the chief engineer announced. "Another 3 to implement repairs, maybe 4. Morgan stood at the head of the conference table, her knuckles white as she gripped its edge. 9 hours meant the launch would fail. The journalists would leave. The investors would withdraw. The senators would remember this embarrassment when Morgan Industries sought federal contracts. Her father would call it proof that women couldn't handle real pressure. Alex had been in the building's mechanical room fixing an HVAC unit when a supervisor called him to the boardroom. They needed all hands, even maintenance, to at least look like they were doing something. He stood in the corner, tool belt around his waist, studying the chaos with the same quiet attention he had once used to assess damaged infrastructure in Kandahar. Unlike the engineers focused on their tablets, he walked to the window and looked out at the generator housing. He noticed something they hadn't, a pattern in the exhaust venting that suggested the problem wasn't electrical, but mechanical. A specific type of mechanical failure he'd seen before in the field when sand had clogged similar systems. "It's the pressure relief valve," he said, not loudly, but with enough certainty that the room quieted. The chief engineer laughed, actually laughed. "The relief valve? That's your expert diagnosis? You're a maintenance worker, not an engineer." Alex shrugged. "I've seen this exact failure pattern before. In Afghanistan, different generator, same Swedish manufacturer. The valve fails, creates a cascade shutdown. Looks electrical, but it's not. I can fix it." The laughter spread through the engineering team. One of them, a young MIT graduate named Preston, was particularly vocal. "You're suggesting that our entire engineering team missed something a janitor spotted? That's absurd." Morgan watched this exchange with growing frustration. The clock on the wall showed 12:45. In 75 minutes, she would either triumph or face the kind of public humiliation that ended careers. She studied Alex's face, the calm certainty, the lack of ego, the way he didn't flinch under the ridicule. Her father had taught her to read people like financial statements. Alex Reeves wasn't lying or grandstanding. He believed he could fix it. "How long?" she asked, cutting through the laughter. 90 minutes, Alex replied. "Maybe less if I can access the right parts." The engineering team erupted in protests. Morgan raised one hand, silencing them. Then she walked across the room until she stood directly in front of Alex, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something expensive and cold, like winter roses. "Let me make this interesting," she said, her voice carrying the kind of dangerous sweetness that preceded hostile takeovers. You claim you can fix what my entire engineering team cannot. Fine. If you succeed, if that generator is running before 2 o'clock, I'll kiss you right here in front of everyone. She paused, letting the absurdity of the offer sink in. A CEO kissing a maintenance worker. The scandal would be delicious. But when you fail, she continued, you're fired. No severance, no reference, nothing. Do we have a deal? The room went silent. Everyone waited for Alex to back down, to admit he'd overstepped, to apologize and retreat. Instead, he looked at her with those steady brown eyes and said something that would replay in her mind for months afterward. I don't need your kiss, Miss Sterling, but my daughter has a robotics demonstration tonight at her school. She needs the lights to work. I'll fix your generator because it's the right thing to do. That's the only deal I need. Alex walked out of the boardroom without waiting for permission, heading straight for the generator housing. He shed his outer work shirt, revealing a white t-shirt underneath that stretched across shoulders built by actual labor. His movements were economical, purposeful, a man who'd learned efficiency in places where wasted motion could be fatal. Inside the generator housing, the problem was worse than he'd anticipated. The pressure relief valve hadn't just failed, it had triggered a cascade of secondary failures throughout the system. The diagnostic panels showed error codes the manual didn't even recognize. But Alex had seen worse. He'd once restored power to a field hospital using salvaged parts from 3 different generators while under mortar fire. He started by bypassing the main control system entirely, a move that would have horrified the engineers watching through the security cameras. Using tools from his personal kit, tools he'd carried through 3 combat zones, he began rewiring the auxiliary circuits to create a temporary bypass. His hands moved with the muscle memory of 20 years, stripping wires with practiced precision, creating connections that existed in no manual but worked in the field. Sweat began to soak through his shirt as the temperature in the housing climbed. The generator was fighting him, every safety system trying to prevent exactly what he was doing. But safety systems were designed by people who'd never had to choose between perfect and functional when lives were on the line. In his mind, he wasn't in a corporate generator housing. He was back in Kandahar, middle of summer, 120 degrees, trying to restore power to a medical facility full of wounded civilians. Except this time, the life on the line was smaller, more personal. Emma had been working on her robot for 3 months. She'd named it Helper because, as she'd explained with 7-year-old seriousness, robots should help people, Daddy, not hurt them. She'd programmed it herself using the coding books Alex had bought with money saved from skipping